Welcome back to the Educator Wellness Revolution podcast, and we're excited to continue our series on mentorship. So today we have a special guest, a principal of a DC school that has been working on implementing mentorship, both among the staff and to support teachers and educators, but also implementing it himself. So we want to welcome Lucas Cooke to the podcast. And Principal Cooke, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Scott. So my name is Lucas Cooke. I'm the principal of MacFarland Middle School. This is my third year here at MacFarland after 5 years of being the principal at Hardy Middle School, also in DC.
Awesome. Well, your school, you've gone through two school communities, and you're in a unique school community now. Tell us a little bit about what makes your community special there, why you wanted to be at MacFarland, and what you found the experience to be like working with this new staff.
So the MacFarland school community very much reflects the community physically that surrounds the school. The students come from the vast majority of the neighborhoods and areas right around here. I, for the past 10 years, have lived in this community, so it's very, close to my heart. The staff here is very passionate about what they do. Our students come from a wide variety of backgrounds and have a lot of needs. And we're fortunate to have a staff that's really invested in supporting them, meeting our kids where they are and helping them grow. So it's really a wonderful community to be in. It's a group of educators that are optimistic, hopeful, dedicated, and hardworking. And you really can't ask for better than that.
Yeah, and obviously we all come to this topic thinking about what our own experiences are with this, both professionally and personally. So thinking about your own life, who has been a mentor to you in your own life, and how they helped you personally and professionally. And we say about mentorship that sometimes people need a different mentor at a different moment in their life or for a different reason, or sometimes you need more than one mentor for different aspects of support. So thinking about, your own life, both personally and professionally, who has been that role for you?
So I've been blessed to have superintendents, all of who I thought of as mentors in the past. I'm on my third superintendent in 8 years. Each of them I felt was very invested in my own personal growth. And then I felt like I had a personal enough relationship with that I could seek their guidance on just about anything related to my own development. One who comes to mind is Natalie Gordon, who I still communicate with and touch base with for her input on things related to like my work, but also, broader decisions, and who I sometimes will throw a problem of practice at. For somebody who I can always trust to be direct with me, honest, who knows my strengths and weaknesses pretty well, and is unflinching, which is the kind of mentorship that I most appreciate.
Yeah, we don't think about that part a lot. Where usually we think about mentor relationships traditionally as we've got someone who's got a lot more experience or more veteran in the career. They've got a set of skills and they're trying to impart them to someone who is younger or less experienced. But someone who understands your weaknesses as well as your strengths is important, right? To figuring out how to help you grow. What's the path you took to become a principal?
So I was working at a school in New York City. I was a teacher there. And then I was asked to become like a part-time assistant principal. Then I became a full-time assistant principal. Then the principal of the school left and asked me to take over when he left and become the principal there. And that was kind of what my pathway was. And then coming from New York City to here, I transitioned back to being an assistant principal for a couple of years before had the opportunity to become a principal again at Hardy. So that was my pathway.
When the principal left and you were asked to become principal, were you intending to go in that direction anyway, or did that just happen?
I never really had a plan to move from the classroom, and then I did, and I didn't really have a plan to move from being an assistant principal, and then I did. So it's been kind of like a series of being asked by maybe the right person who I felt knew me well enough and had belief in me, and me feeling that I would give it a try. It was never something that I sought out.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that because obviously sometimes you have a mentor who sees something in you that you might not see in yourself. And sometimes the right moment arises, or sometimes it's the right person believing that you have the set of skills to do the new thing that puts you on a different career trajectory.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was the moment didn't feel right to me because I didn't think I was ready. But I also have come to believe that when it comes to school leadership, if you're 100% certain that you're ready and right for the job, you probably aren't.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects of it. It seems impossible to be ready for any particular day, let alone ready for the job in general. But you build up a set of skills that give you confidence to that you have the toolkit, right, to deal with whatever comes at it. So thinking about what your staff need in that way, like building their own toolkit, building their own confidence, and being able to do their jobs most effectively. Why did you feel like this was the right moment to focus on mentorship at MacFarland?
I think there's a couple reasons. The first is that at MacFarland, we're blessed to have a cadre of teachers who have been teaching for what I call like a little bit longer. It doesn't mean that they're 30-year teachers. It doesn't mean they're 10-year teachers. There's not necessarily a minimum on how much experience they have, but people that have enough of a skill set that they felt comfortable that they could support somebody else. That piece is key, and I think having a community where people want to support like new educators coming in was helpful, and then also having people believe that the work that we're doing here is meaningful and that they'd want to support somebody in doing it well. I think those are some of the key pieces. And then because we have a fairly large staff, we don't have a ton of turnover year to year, but the turnover that we have means that we will get some newer people to the school and often some younger people to the schools. So it's going to be a need for us probably. I mean, I'd like to have a year where we have no new staff members, right? But the reality is with close to 100 staff members, it's just
Yeah.
unlikely. So we're always going to have this need. And I think after the first couple of years being here at MacFarland, realizing that, to be blunt, like I wasn't really supporting the mentorship process as well, and that our new people were not really onboarding as effectively as we wanted them to, and then kind of getting acclimated, it was a need that was kind of clear to us. And that's not through like folks complaining or failing or even quitting. It's more from a sense that like, this would have been more helpful if we would have gotten this information to these people 6 weeks ago, or so and so would really benefit from having somebody to run these kind of ideas off of, and they'd grow faster. It was more of like a realization as we saw where we could support our joining staff better.
And I feel like you've started to get here, but Empowered has been supporting this program at the school this year. And why did you feel like it was something that could use outside support or might benefit from not being completely an internal effort from having that extra push?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that I think we tend to over exaggerate what our own bandwidth is. And it's nice, like we have a good set of administrators here that I think all believe that they could, and I think that they're correct, mentor and support new educators. But the reality is there's a lot of work to do here. And we weren't doing it at the level that I think we were satisfied with because we needed more support. So broadening it to include more people, and then broadening it to include Empower Ed support where they could help facilitate some of the mentorship and coaching was key. It really had to do with us kind of reckoning with like, we're not really getting this done on our own, but we know it's important. And so that collaboration, I think, has been key. I also think safe mentorship is important. And sometimes, as much as we love our staff, having an administrator directly involved in a mentorship program can sometimes add a stress to it, or just create a dynamic of not everybody feeling as comfortable being 100% honest where they need support, right? It's really hard to ask for support. It's even harder when you feel like maybe your boss is sitting there listening to what you need help with. So this partnership allows us to kind of step a little bit sideways from the process, and allow it to happen more directly with our staff collaborating with each other, which I think is essential.
Yeah, I want to reinforce a couple of those points because I think sometimes not just with the work that we're doing with you all, but why third-party support sometimes is helpful across things that happen in schools. It's just because like where you started, how much the principalship or how much school leadership involves on a daily basis. And so part of it is just like having someone there to push it up an agenda, right? To be like, hey, where are we on this thing? Hey, what's happening with this? And then to support the people directly. But also I like that you said step to the side, not step back from it, right? But it's like we're here to support it, you're here to support it. You're going to play a role in making sure it's moving. But people are going to know that the administration is behind this or that the leadership supports this. And I think what we found at MacFarland is it's been a really natural process because the people taking on the role really wanted to do the role. This wasn't something that like we're coming in and pushing a new initiative on them. There were volunteers who raised their hand and said like we want a mentor, and for us it's really just how are we giving them the support they need, the structure they need, the incentives they need to make sure it keeps going. So where we are in the year right now, what do you think you've learned so far about focusing on mentorship in this way and how it's helped new teachers?
I think, well, I can see that our staff, like our newer staff, I can see them I don't want to use the word assimilating because that has a negative connotation in some ways, but becoming a part of the MacFarland family and being like more kind of brought in a little bit further, a little bit faster, I think is almost visible. I feel like if I was to just take this cadre of educators and kind of take their satisfaction, like a peek at it right now with a temperature, compared to last year's, they probably feel like their affirmations would probably back that up. And our staff insight in the fall was up on every point compared to every previous year in the school. I think that while this mentorship may not have been the contributor to all of that growth, I'm certain that it helped with the growth of that as well. So I think there's a lot of data indicators, both subjective and objective, that tell us that it's working. For me, from an observational perspective, I kind of pay attention to the approach that Empowered takes with our team and looks at some of the activities that they do. And I'm trying to like learn from those so I can kind of add them to our tool bag. So this becomes a program we have in perpetuity. So I think that's been really helpful just to watch somebody else think about and figure out how to do this, as opposed to us just say, we're going to do mentorship this way. I think in some ways that is almost like a top-down approach to mentorship, which should really not be a top-down process.
It's an interesting thing because you hear people so often in education saying right now, we need like teacher mentoring across the board. And that's a really tricky thing to do because you could put it in a place of policy that says every new teacher across the district is going to get a veteran teacher mentor. And it could be a pretty spectacular failure because what you're doing is arranging a marriage essentially that might not be the right relationship, right, for them. It has to be a lot more organic than this, which is why trying to do it on the school level, I think makes a lot of sense. And then trying to expand out what's working from there. And part of it for us in our approach is we are supporting them in doing it, but we're also thinking about what is the kind of small shifts they can make a little bit at a time. So how do we talk, for example, the first time we came in, it was our language around feedback, right? How can we shift language around feedback a little bit? And those are things that the mentor and mentees can learn together. I think part of what makes mentorship successful is that the mentor and mentees feel like they're both getting something out of it, that there's a dual relationship here and it's not just one way. So what do you think mentor teachers are getting out of these relationships?
Well, that's a good question. I think if you ask them, probably most of them would speak to the satisfaction of like helping contribute to the health and wellness of our school and our profession in general. And that there is something personally fulfilling about knowing that you're supporting somebody else who's joining us or growing into MacFarland. We incentivize the mentorship to some degree at MacFarland by allowing people to use it towards like their it's called CSC in DCPS, but it's like how they contribute to the school community. So mentorship is one of the things that we kind of advertise, like if this is something you're interested in, it can help you get X score on that, because it certainly contributes to the growth and collaboration of our community. But I think if you were to ask them, it's less that kind of like carrot from an evaluation perspective and much more about that feeling of like pouring into someone and knowing that they're helping them grow in a meaningful way in work that is inherently meaningful.
And just to take a moment on the incentive thing, I think it's important because I think sometimes if there's not that thing there, if they feel like they're doing this work and they're not getting credit for it, the way you're providing with through evaluation or kind of through that bonus, then people can feel some kind of way about not getting credit for something, but that's not going to be the primary driver, right? So I think it's interesting to have incentives there, but them not be the central focus of why it happens. And I think that's a good approach. So we came across a podcast episode a little while back when we were thinking about designing mentorship programs for a bunch of our school partners. And it was talking about reverse mentorship, where school people in an executive role, be it in any kind of corporation or a school leader role in a school setting, would actually be reverse mentored and have someone, for example, who's a teacher or a staff member mentoring school leaders. So we said, who would be willing to try this kind of thing? And we thought, I bet Luke would be willing to try it, because it requires a certain amount of vulnerability to say, I'm going to actually be mentored by someone who is below me on the supervisory chain. So you've been trying it out this year. What is going on with reverse mentorship? How have you found that experience?
So I have a reverse mentor. It's Miss Lee. She's one of our teachers. She's been here at MacFarland longer than I have. I'd certainly call her like a veteran teacher, but she's also a teacher who's consistently, supporting. She's one of the teachers that is involved in everything at the school. She's very well respected by our colleagues and myself. And I also have had, for the couple years I've been here, very candid conversations with her. So my rationale for choosing her is that I trust her to be direct with me. And I think that I wanted somebody, if I'm going to do this, who's going to feel comfortable being direct and honest with me about like what their assessment is and what their input is, because it's difficult to probably for anybody give feedback to their supervisor. But if they solicit it and specifically tell you that they want you to do it because they know you're going to be honest with them, I think it helps like push a little bit. What I didn't anticipate in getting into this, and I've shared this term with Miss Lee, is how therapeutic it is for me. I think it's given me a forum to kind of discuss like ideas and decisions that I have with somebody in a safe space. Not necessarily that I related to like things of a sensitive nature, but when we're thinking about like school climate or supporting our strongest students as we support our ones with the most needs, or literally like operational elements of the building, any of the topics that we've touched on, it gives me a kind of like opportunity to voice ideas and get from one of my staff members, who would be one of the people who's going to help enact them, like exactly what they think about it. And then for her to give me like direct observational feedback, like, hey, when you do this, you might not recognize, but it has this impact. People are probably not telling you because it's not a huge deal, but it might be better if you tried that. And just like I think we want to give teachers feedback as coaches, whether it's in a mentoring role or not, that is both like loving, supportive, but maybe correct something that could have a stronger impact. My experience with this is that that's what I'm getting from my teacher. It's corrective feedback, but it comes from a place of love and caring and knowing that some adjustment could have a better outcome. But it feels very therapeutic in the sense that I feel comfortable like being just completely honest and then getting that feedback on how I can continue to improve. Now, what that says about my own psychology and how wrapped up I am in my job is a whole different story, but it's something that I look forward to. We meet every other week, and it's something I look forward to.
It's interesting what you said about kind of like someone who's noticing the smaller things that people might not tell you because it's relatively small. Because we always talk about in wellness the philosophy of Kaizen, which is making the smallest possible change or making small and continuous change. And it's interesting because I feel like most of us who are in some kind of leadership position, we get feedback on the big stuff sometimes. And this is probably true of people we're supervising too, and not the kind of daily habits. And actually, a lot of times it's the daily habits that are driving people's perception of you, right? And I think like you have to have a really trusting relationship with someone to say, here's a thing that you do routinely that you might not recognize, but actually a small shift in this might make a difference to people, even if it's not the thing that they're gonna bring up, right? So I think that's an interesting observation.
I think, yeah, and I think that's right. And I think as a principal, I'm not going to speak for every principal, but sometimes having something that feels like bite-sized, actionable, and that you can do without like corralling 100 people or like waiting 3 months feels good, right? Like, hey, I could do that differently tomorrow. You don't get that a lot as a school principal, and having it and knowing that, A, it may have an impact on how things in your building are going, and B, at the very least, your teachers are going to they're going to know about it, and they're going to recognize like he takes feedback from us and then tries it. I think it kind of helps us all commit to that process.
I mean, I think that's like the biggest thing. Working with as many principals as we do, I feel like that is the thing we're trying to give principals a lot, because the feedback from teachers is often really big picture stuff, right? It's the demands are big sometimes, and we're in a system that nobody is particularly thrilled with sometimes. And to be able to say like, actually, if you do these two small things, people are going to start to feel better, and then actually it's going to create a momentum towards trying to do some bigger things together because it's going to increase trust. Is huge. I think principals always love that, but I think probably anyone benefits from that. Like, actually, there's these small things you can do that is going to start to shift a dynamic, right? And I think just like thinking about that, you have a way of working with your staff. We've observed and spoken to your teachers, over the years that obviously people really trust you. People trust your leadership and they trust your leadership team. But you have a very human-centered way of working with people. And I think that's something that we try to instill or we try to teach widely. But a lot of that is a personal approach. So I'm curious what advice you would give to other school leaders as they try to take a more human-centered approach, as they try to build trust with staff and in efforts to retain them.
I think I'm sorry. The first thing that you can do is just make yourself accessible as much as you can. Be visible, be out, and then also make it a point to like check in with people. I think those are like the most typical things that you can point to a school leader to do. But I think even so, there are still going to be people who feel hesitant to come even share with you something like, hey, I have this going on in my personal life. I have, this may impact me getting to school on time, or I'm just in a tough spot right now. I know my lesson plans haven't been what they should be. Creating a mechanism where people understand that like check-ins are going to be like routine, and that part of them is going to be a human check-in. I think is a key piece. We've tried to grow like just the check-in process this year from something that happened in our 6th grade to something that happens across all school. So every staff has that time where they know one of us is going to sit with them, and it's not about your evaluation. We're probably not the person who does your impact. It's just I'm the person for whatever reason that's going to check on you and have some time to talk about like how things are going in the school and ask you how you're doing. I think you have to be intentional about it. You can be convivial and friendly and do those things. But I think finding whatever ways are going to be your ways in school to be intentional about structures that let people know that you're invested in them. If it's mentorship and that's the first step you take because you want to make sure everybody who's coming into your building recognizes that importance, and that's like your first piece as a school leader, that's a good place to start. The reverse mentorship, I think, if you've been in your building for a while, you probably already have teachers and staff that you have trusting relationships with, but creating this mechanism where they're being pushed to give you feedback, so they're actually going to spend the time noticing and taking stock of things is, if you're a veteran principal, a much lighter lift. I think depending on where you are in your journey and in your school, you're just picking something as a starting point. And I think these ones that we've been talking about, mentorship, are ones that typically, to your point earlier, Scott, when you asked about my mentorship, most of us have had this experience in a way that was impactful for us. So replicating that for people is a good indicator that they understand that you're invested in them as humans.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm going to surprise you with a little lightning round to close out here. So
Okay.
think about someone who was a mentor to you when you were in middle school, or you were around the age of the students in your school now. Is there someone who comes to mind?
Oh, in middle school, that was a tough time.
Or who you wanted to kind of mentorship you needed?
I, I'm struggling on this question. Middle school is a really rough spot for me personally, and I can't think of anybody that was like that person. I can think of, well, no, was that middle school? I have a friend. His name was Dan Muller. We became friends in middle school, and he was kind of one of the only kids that like stuck with me when I went through some tough years. I guess I could consider that mentorship because he was there, and we ended up staying friends, all through high school. So there's
Yeah.
one.
Is there a celebrity, someone you don't know, who you feel like, man, if someone could introduce me to them tomorrow, I would love to learn a little bit from them.
Oh, that's a really difficult question. I mean, the easiest one is Barack Obama, right? Like, probably everybody would say that. Like, I'd love to have him in my corner, especially right now. Um, it would be great to have his insights on like how to lead through something that's so difficult but maintain hope. But let me try and think of somebody like that's like a default easy one because it's political and safe.
Yeah.
I'll give a one that's like less political. Tony Stark, Iron Man. I feel like he went through some difficult crises and learned a lot. He sacrificed himself for his community. So he had that right heart in there. But maybe him as like a fun celebrity answer.
I like that. And let's close out with why does this all matter to you? So why does educator wellness help you in your goals that you're trying to achieve as a principal? How do you believe it supports your students?
I love my students. I want my staff to love my students. I think of love, and I know it's a corny word to choose, but I think love of not something that's necessarily always reciprocal, but something that always gets reciprocated, if that makes sense. So if I'm going to expect my staff to pour love into my kids, then I got to pour love into them. And I think that is one of the grounding pieces of belief that I have about how we should educate our kids. So to me, it's essential to treat the staff the same way.
Well, we see you doing it every day, and in the kind of conversations that you're having with your staff, with the families, and the kind of school that you're trying to create there. So, Lucas Cooke, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Scott.